Okay, so here we are. I'm going to try to say something about. That's not doing that. That's really kicking it. So.
No, it's fine.
Okay, so I'm going to try and say something about the relationship between this transforming poison into wisdom through the power of imagination and this term emptiness. Now, I'll say more about this term. It's not a very satisfactory translation of a term which is actually shunyata, is the Buddhist terminology for this experience, but I would say more about that in a moment. So we're looking at how we can make this transformation come about. So as I've said previously, what we're really trying to do is bring about a transformation of our perception. So we're not going off anywhere into some other world. We're not kind of moving into a different plane of existence. We're simply changing our perception of this. All this here and now is the working ground for our spiritual life. And we just sat in meditation, and what we were trying to do in that meditation was really trying to connect with our actual experience. So we're not just thinking about practice, we're not thinking about where the spiritual life is taking place. We're actually trying to make contact with something which is already here, which, as I say, is this constant flow of sensations that are arising and passing within our experience. And this flow of sensations, we could describe them as a magical display. We have no control over what arises within our experience. As we know endlessly, when we try to control our thoughts, when we try to control our emotional state, it just rolls and rolls. We can't actually get a grip on this flow of sensations coming and going. And the point I want to kind of stress tonight is that every sensation, every experience arising is potentially a gateway. Everything is potentially filled with significance. So by entering our actual experience, particularly when in relationship to others, when we're in relationship to that which is beyond our own kind of inner experience, it seems that there is the potential, at least, of bringing significance, bringing meaning and value into our lived experience. So this is the territory that we're working on, really, becoming familiar, more and more familiar with what is actually happening here. What is it that's going on here in my body, in my heart, in my mind, in this outer world, and try to come into fruitful relationship to those experiences. And as we know, and we've been talking about the wheel of life last week, what tends to happen is that all of us carry stories which tend to kind of become visible through the kind of internal monologue that is running inside of us all. Even as I'm speaking now, you'll have a commentary going, which will be kind of evaluating, judging, exploring what's being said. So we have a kind of conceptual or a kind of a linguistic narrative going on, but also, and probably more importantly, we have a cellular response to the arising of sensations. And that is the territory that is often most difficult to access in our experience, we're simply in a response to, we've been activated into a response. We hardly notice that that has arisen in us. But we have these responses, and those two working together are internal narratives and our cellular responses. What they tend to do is bind us into a particular way of being in relationship to ourselves and each other. We're constantly filtering, well, we have to do this, we are constantly filtering experience to be able to function. If we allowed every sensation to become fully present, we could be completely swamped, overwhelmed with sensation. So we just to perform, to carry on our lives, we have to do a certain amount of filtering of our experience. And these filters are built up over time, so the way we perceive things is greatly dependent on the habits of ways of seeing and knowing the world that we've learned throughout our life. So as I've said before, each one of us here is living in an entirely separate universe. There's nothing here which we could all point to and say, that is how it is. Each one of us would interpret this and the sensations arising in you. You'd be filtering them in a very particular and specific way to you. I find that quite shocking, because I often assume that I'm living in a world that everybody's thinking and being in the same, seeing the world in my way. But of course, as soon as we start to come into relationship with each other, we suddenly realise, oh, you're not seeing it quite as I see it. And what I thought was real is actually just a view. So this is the kind of territory that we are trying to explore within this series, and any teaching of the Dharma. We are trying to explore the relationship between our mind, the way our mind, our bodies knowing, defines and creates our experience of life. So just as the mind, the body tends to bind us in particular ways, also and these same experiences are the doorway to liberation. So there's nowhere else that we're going to get this knowing from. We're not going to be liberated by something else kind of coming into this situation. All that we need is right here in our current experience. If we could really know that, we would, if we could open sufficiently, relax sufficiently to know that, we would be fully awake, which is one of the descriptions for the Buddha. He who is awake, they who are awake. So the doorway to liberation is right here. So it means that we don't have to go off into some other world to find that liberation. More, we come down into this world to find it right here amongst us, within and between us. So the symbol, I think, that most encapsulates this experience of the potentiality of this moment is this symbol. Now, unfortunately, I spent too much time talking this evening, so I didn't actually get a vajra onto the shrine before we started the evening. So this is a beautiful symbol, and one that actually creates derives a whole school of Buddhist thought, an idea called the Vajrayana. And I'm going to say a little bit about this symbol of the Vajra as a means to open up this territory that the poisons and the wisdoms are completely entwined in this, our current experience. So we don't need to go off elsewhere to seek wisdom. More, we turn towards our current experience and try to see deeply, sufficiently into that, and out of that, wisdom will naturally be present. So this is the thesis, really, of this evening. And of course, to achieve this, we need imagination. So I probably should just kind of explain this term of imagination. So imagination can sometimes be talked about in a slightly sort of pejorative way. The imagination, oh, it's just your imagination. It's and it kind of sets it up in opposition to the real world, the material world, the kind of the world of reason and logic. But actually, imagination is just as much a real part of our experience as anything else. And it's really, I think it's really important that we honour imagination, the power of our imagination. It's the power of imagination that both binds us and frees us. If we have this sense of imagination in that we have created a whole scenario in which we are bad and wrong, that is an imaginative exercise that builds our world. Equally, if we think we are, let's say, we are superior to another person, that again is an imaginative construction that is affecting our lived experience. So imagination is completely integral to being a human being. It comes back to there is nothing here. There's a very small vajra being passed around. Yeah, don't worry about me, I'll just carry on with it. But it's important to get a tactile sense of this beautiful symbol. So, and engaging with the symbol within the imagination is actually really something I think is very helpful. So I'm going to say a little bit about this symbol. And the first thing is that I'm talking about, I'll be saying a little bit more about this term shunyata in a moment. But just to say, at the heart of this minute symbol that you're passing around, you'll see there's a circular section to it, which sits right at the heart of this symbol. And this sphere is the sphere of, it's called non-duality, so non-separation. So in the heart of this symbol, there is no splitting into self and other, me and you, world, inner and outer. We are an interconnected, interdependent whole. And that includes all our experiences. So this is right at the heart of this teaching of the Vajrayana. That right at the heart of all this, our personal experience or impersonal experience is shunyata. So I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a moment. But what we have, that this non-dual space, this sphere, blossoms into duality. So all our experience tends to blossom into duality. We split our experience to try to make more sense, to try to get a handle on what is this, what is happening here. So as they say, we split our experience into me and you, inner and outer, light and dark, good and bad, etc., etc. And this judgment and evaluation process is this primary splitting out of our experience. And it's actually, if we can begin to see that, how we are using our mind to split our experience in possibly unhelpful ways, but also recognizing when we feel a real kind of connection, a real interconnectedness, a real interdependence, then the same symbol becomes, rather than seeing it as a kind of a splitting, a difficult experience, we can see the beauty of a unified field of experience that goes beyond or sits within self and other. So we have this basic splitting of our experience, which we're doing all the time unconsciously. And there's various kind of strata to this experience, which I'm not going to go into tonight. But the next bit I want to just talk about is that, just go back to this, if you look at these ends, the prongs of the vajra, what you may notice is that they're actually, let's see if I can do this. I haven't actually used this before. No, I can't do that. Somewhere there's a little pointer, I think, which should be very fancy if I could get it to. No, it's too complicated. I'll have to play with it. So what I want to say is that these prongs, they're actually they're the heads and tongues of what's called a makara. So a makara is something similar to a crocodile. And what's interesting about them is that these makaras are able to inhabit the world of water and of earth. So they are able to move between realms. They can hold different realms of being. They can live within these different realms. So the makaras personify, as you can see from the diagram, they personify both the poisons and the wisdoms. Out of this basic duality, the makaras appear and they come into being. They express being in numerous, infinite numbers of ways. But what is really fantastic, and why I think this is such a, I was going to say magical, but I think okay. So what is really fantastic about this symbol is that no matter where you are or which makara emerges, if you follow it, if you pursue it to the end of its tongue, in other words, as far as you can go within that experience, what you do is you meet this core axis that runs through the whole symbol, that naturally folds you back into the heart of the symbol, non-duality. So wherever you are, whether you're in the depths of a poison or in the sublime heights of a wisdom, you will always be able to go deeper and deeper into that experience, and it will lead you back to an interconnected, interdependent state of being. So I think that's fantastic. That means that we don't need to head off. We don't need to go anywhere else apart from here and really be present here. If we could really engage with the makara of a particular sensation and really pursue it, really explore it in its fullness, including its solidity but also its spaciousness, we would be led back to the heart of the symbol. So this is the quality that we are trying to evoke, or I'm trying to evoke for you, in saying that the wisdoms and the poisons are completely interwoven. It's not that one is distinct and alone, different from the wisdom. They're both arising from the same source, but it's our perception of the sensation of the experience that is creating either poison or wisdom. And the main reason for that is that on the poison end, on the poison end of things, what we tend to do, we tend to get lost in identification with the experience. We're building a sense of separate selfhood, building a sense of trying to make the world work for us as we are. It's the nature of the poison. We're trying to reinforce a sense of separate selfhood. Whereas, so within those poisons, what tends to happen is that we get lost in one end of the pole and we lose our way back to the centre. So this is what happens with us. I was going to try and say something about wisdom, but actually, I think I might let that one go. Do I need to try to expand? I think it'd be only fair, as I've mentioned the poisons, to mention the wisdoms. So I think possibly the way that we could understand this, or the way I can try to sort of describe this to you, is that the wisdoms are simply pointers to a direct, immediate experience. We can tend to kind of conceptualize, we can tend to kind of, again, create some sort of subtle separation from life by identifying with a particular part of our experience. But actually, the wisdoms in their fullest is because we kind of got an inextricable bond that leads us back to the core of the symbol, to non-duality. So the wisdoms, I would say, they are, because they're not bound by trying to create selfhood out of the experience, they naturally can flow back to their source, the source of non-duality. Okay, so I'm now going to try and say something in 5 minutes about the nature of shunyata. Now, those of you who know anything about this subject will know that people have spent their whole lives trying to make sense and try to communicate the essence of this term, shunyata. So in 5 minutes, I'll just say a little bit about this experience. So shunyata, what it's referring to, the sort of fuller translation you could say, is that every sensation that arises and passes is empty, that is, that it's fleeting, so it's always in change, and it's without any essential essence. Now that's only one side of the story, of course. So everything has this quality of shunyata, but also the fuller description of it is that without shunyata, nothing could arise and pass. We'd just be in a fixed position. We'd be here for all eternity. In fact, we wouldn't be able to breathe in or breathe out, because we need shunyata to actually be able to function, in the sense that the breath has to have space to move into, and the in-breath, again, it needs an empty space to move back into the body. So shunyata on a very simple level is kind of crucial to experience. It's also, I couldn't step forward if there was no shunyata here, because we need that space to be able to move into into the next phase of our life, the next moment of our life. So the really fantastic message of Shunyata is that it brings this infinite sense of potentiality. That actually everything, because we are kind of inherently empty of anything of substance, anything that is not impermanent, because of that, there is this enormous potentiality to our lives. That the more that we can simply let go and relax, this potentiality that we can allow that which is completely unknowable to us in this moment, by simply relaxing and opening, this potentiality of our life becomes visible, can show itself, simply by us creating space for it. Alison, sorry to disturb you. Could I ask you to turn the heating off? Thank you. So we have this potentiality that is a really important key aspect of Shunyata. And it's also another term that I'm very keen on, is that Shunyata points to the space of emergence. So, for me, the term, the Dharma, is the truth. But the truth isn't something that is fixed, that is kind of solid and permanent. It's constantly having to be renewed in our own individual experience. There's nothing that we can point to say that is true, that is the truth. We can know it directly in the moment, we can kind of feel it, we can taste it. But this emergent aspect of Shunyata means that the Dharma is actually always alive and constantly refreshing and renewing itself. So we can't rely on the old bones of a previous expression of the Dharma. It always has to be re-known within our own experience. Of course we can rely on the bones of the past, but actually, ultimately, we have to know it directly in our own experience. We have to live it, discover it in our lived experience. So the space of emergence, this Shunyata aspect of being, is absolutely central to the spiritual life. And it gives rise to creativity. If anybody's done anything creative, you'll know that the main aspect of being creative is that you step into this space of unknowing, of not knowing what's going to happen next, of not knowing what's going to emerge in your experience, in your responses to the act of creativity. If we kind of think we know what we're doing in the creative space, what tends to happen is we simply replicate the already known. If we're being truly creative, we're stepping into a space where we have to wait for the next step, the next phrase, the next moment to make itself known to us. This is Shunyata kind of at play, that we enter that creative space of not knowing. Now, it's not saying that we're just kind of walking around in a fog, because one of the things is that knowing is very precise, very clear. We know it as it arises. We know how to respond if we really trust Shunyata, trust that not knowing. Actually, we can act completely spontaneously. We can be ultimately creative and bring beauty and bring meaning into our shared lives. So this is really what we're trying to do by engaging with this symbol, with this path, this Buddhist path, is to guide us into a state of complete spontaneity. So we're not reliant on any particular form, any particular way of being. We're simply reaching down into our actual experience and trying to live out of that for the benefit of ourselves and for each other. So, in Shunyata, out of Shunyata, the world is always seen afresh. If we're really open to this sense of, I've no idea what that flower looks like. I've no idea, really, the nature of a candle flame. But it's so kind of, to really get into that open state and really explore our experience is such a rich world to inhabit, where we put down thinking that we know what this is, what our relationship with others is. When we really open into that, then things can reveal their significance, can reveal their meaning. And Blake described this as bifocal seeing. So we just see the world, the ordinary world as it is, most of us experience most of the time. But actually what we see within this world is we see there's a whole other layer to this experience, which is always bringing meaning and bringing significance to each and every moment. Each and every sensation can lead us down through our habits, through our familiarity of how we are, into this completely fresh and open place of Shunyata. So bifocal is trying to recognise that we can see and hold the world in these two different ways. We can see the world through the heart, through imagination, and we can see it as in the kind of ordinary, materialistic, mundane way. And they don't have to be in opposition with each other. It's simply that we are opening beyond our normal way of perceiving, just trying to really relax into this broader field of knowing. And through that, we can start to imagine ourselves in our fullness. We can start to release from the fixed ways of knowing ourselves, of knowing others. I mean, I look around the room, in some ways I have a judgment, I have a view, I know who you are. But of course, I've no idea who you are. I've no idea, really, what's going on internally to you, what the whole of your life has been, what has brought you to this spot. I can't really ever know that. So just stepping into that, I don't know who you are. It's quite exciting in some way. It's kind of and important. So can we imagine ourselves, others, as this kind of fresh, in this fresh new way? And of course the world itself, this magnificent world around us, currently bursting into kind of bud, into leaf. How amazing. I mean, hopefully we knew it was coming, but it is such a revelatory experience that this dry piece of wood is now it's got all this life happening through and within it. And I kind of feel is that any different to us? That we go through these periods of feeling like dead trees, but then something happens. Something kind of seems to emerge through us, and we move into the next phase of our cycle of experience. So this is what we are working with through the the receiving, the letting in of shunyata. And, a bit fancy words, it returns us into magnificent ordinariness, which I think is something about that, is that we can think that we have to be a bit special or have to do things in a special way to be a spiritual, a Buddhist who's living the spiritual life. You might imagine we have to kind of live in a particular way and kind of squeeze ourselves. Oh, is this what a Buddhist looks like? I'm not sure. Let's try another shape. So we kind of go on playing these kind of attempts to become the proper Buddhist. But actually, a lot of what it means, I think, to become a Buddhist, to live the Buddhist life, is to relax into who we are in this, our current experience, and trust the sensation. Trust that if we really enter our experience fully, that is sufficient. That ordinariness is sufficient. To try to make ourselves special, God, it's so exhausting. So I really kind of encourage us to relax. Just become magnificently ordinary. And what happens? Through that, I'm going to say more about this next week, but this is a little kind of taster for where we're going next week, is that by... we talked in the first week and the second week actually about these what are seen as poisons: hatred, attachment, addiction, envy, ignorance. These qualities which we kind of tend to judge, they tend to get quite a bad press. But actually, if we really enter those experiences fully, without fear, without judgment, and recognise them in the light of shunyata, in the sense that they are not fixed, they're not solid, they are in flow, they lead us back to shunyata. If we can really open into that, where does it take us? So the bottom line here is a description from the Buddhist perspective of the wisdoms of the Buddhas. So each of the poisons has its quality of wisdom. I'll say more about that next week. I think, I just want to flag that up, because that's where we're travelling towards, to look at what's called the Buddha Mandala. So we've looked at the Wheel of Life this last week. Today, I'm just setting the ground really to start to move towards what's described as the Buddha Mandala. And I suppose one of the things I just want to end by saying is that in this, we'll see, we're probably familiar with many of the poisons. And just to say something about shunyata being that because there's no fixed single self here which is substantial and ongoing, we're actually a collection of selves that will move through these various poisons. They'll come to the fore, they'll dissipate, others, something else will come to the fore. So there is, shunyata also points us to this experience that there is no self. We are multiple selves. And I think that's important to acknowledge, because again it can become a trap that we're trying to get this perfect self, this spiritual being. We're trying to bring this particular being to the fore, and in doing so we're having to suppress all these other aspects of our life. And actually what we're trying to encourage in the Buddhist path is this sense of flow and trust in our experience. Now, it's not to say that we have to go off and really chase after our addiction. If we're in addiction, it's quite, what we're trying to do is look deeply into that current experience. And we might find that the addiction moves through to envy, I don't know, could be anything. But we're in this flow of shifting selves. There is nothing within you and in anybody else that is fixed and permanent. And the more that we can allow that in, the more that we can relax, because we don't have to protect that imagined self. There's nothing there that needs protecting. There's something there to be honoured and appreciated, but there's nothing that needs to be protected. We're okay in our numerous different expressions of our being. So this is, just going to end with that, just as I say, next week I'm going to be looking at these wisdoms in much more detail, with the hope that we can recognise them within our own experience and recognise that they are actually known in part, at least. The qualities, the wisdom qualities, can be known through really exploring deeply our apparent poisons. So I'm going to leave it there.